Hey PPC Sammers, just thought I'd share this little bid strategy with you. It's a little bit complex, so that's why I thought I'd just shoot a quick video just to explain what it's all about. And then you can take this and use it, or change it around to suit your own needs. That's totally fine. So let's have a high-level view first of all at what the strategy is about, and then we'll dig into some of the logic. So if I expand my screen here, and I'll zoom out a little bit, and we should be able to see that we've got a whole bunch of steps here. We've actually got quite a few steps. Just keeps going and going and going. So we'll cover all this logic very quickly, and then happy to field any questions on the Facebook group if you've got any other questions about how the system actually works. So the first thing that the system relies on, we've actually built it in a way that makes it really easy to adjust your bids per client, or even change the bids that you've already got set on this strategy, because as you saw, there's like a million steps in here, and so you wouldn't want to have to go through and change every bid ceiling or bid floor limit, or the percentage that you want to change the bids up or down by. So what we've done is we've created I've created in my account, and you can replicate this, some custom variables specifically designed for bid strategies. And I'll show you what they look like. So if we go back to the client info screen here, we can see down the bottom we've got a max bid custom variable, a bid increase by amount variable, which I've set at this case to 5 cents, a bid increase by percentage, and we'll talk about the reason that we've got two of these. So we've got increasing bids we can either do by an amount, as in a dollar amount, or by a percentage. And the same goes for decreasing bids. And so if you wanted to use this type of strategy where you're creating custom variables for bid strategies, maybe not necessarily this one, but if you wanted to use this kind of idea, you can do that through the settings menu. And then if we scroll all the way down here, you can create custom variables here just by hitting create new custom variable, type in the name that you want, save that, and then change variables to whatever you want as your default position to be. So you'll be able to see in my case, I've set up my maximum bid at 1 cent default, maximum bid increase 1 cent, maximum decrease 1 cent, increase percentage 1%, 1%. So I've put them in at very, very low sort of default positions, because then what I can do, if I flick back to my process, I can quite easily refer to that in the process itself, where I can ask the question, have I got my custom variables set? And so what I've got in here is, does my max bid equal 1 cent? Or does my bid increase equal 1 cent? Or does my bid increase by percentage equal 1? Etc., etc. So essentially this is just checking to see if these variables have been set or not. And so if any one of those variables equals the default, then this bid process just won't run. So this is the safety mechanism to make sure that the bid process won't run and set everything down to 1 cent because you forgot to change your custom variables. So that's what that bit is about. So the next thing that it looks at is, are we using search campaigns? And again, that's just naming protocol that I'm using on my search campaigns. So _SEA is how I start all my search campaigns. So that's what the process is looking for. So if you use a different naming system, then just change this out to be whatever suits your naming system. Then I've gone ahead and said, look, if anything contains brand or competitor, just ignore it. Because for those campaigns, we want to use maybe a bid towards ad position, or something that incorporates impression share loss, etc. So I wouldn't use this personally for brand or competitor campaigns. But if you want to, you can easily just bypass those steps by removing them and just joining up the yes straight over here. So then I've asked the question, does the campaign contain 2 or more conversions? and the time period that we're looking at is all time. So this is a CPA bid strategy. So I need to make sure that my campaign at least has 2 conversions in it or more. So if it's only got 1 or 0, there's really not much point running a CPA bid strategy. So at this point, for the keyword to pass through and have its bid adjusted, it needs to belong to a campaign that has some conversions. The keyword also has to be active, and it has to have had clicks yesterday. And that's important because what we're looking for throughout this strategy is we're trying to work out, based on our target CPA, what is the ideal CPC that we should be paying for any particular keyword. And then we're testing to see what was the CPC yesterday compared to that ideal CPC. And if the CPC was too high yesterday compared to ideal, then we decrease the bids. And if the CPC was too low yesterday, then we increase the bids. So we're always trying to push the CPCs around to get them as close as possible to that ideal target CPC. The formula that we use to work out what our ideal CPC is essentially our target CPA multiplied by the number of conversions we've had, and then we divide that by the number of clicks we've had. So if we work through a live account and actually see how that works, that might help explain it. So let's go to an account here, and we'll look at some keywords. So let's look at this keyword that's had 11 conversions in the last 30 days. And let's just say our target cost per conversion was $20. So in this case, it's a little bit high. So what our formula would do is it would say, all right, we've had 11 conversions. Our target CPA was $20. Therefore, ideally, we should have spent $220 to get these 11 conversions. But to work out how much we should have spent per click, we just have to take that $220 and divide it by the number of clicks that we've actually had to work out how much each click should have cost us in an ideal world. So if we do that quickly, we've got $220 divided by 144 clicks, gives us an ideal CPC of $1.52. And we can see here that we've actually spent $1.96 on average over the last 30 days. And if we actually check yesterday's CPC, remembering that we're looking for $1.52, we've actually got $1.78 yesterday. So we're still a little bit high on this keyword. So what we would be expecting is for our bid strategy to see that and reduce our bids slightly to try and get our average CPC here down to $1.52. And once that starts hitting around $1.52, then ideally our cost per conversion should be somewhere close to where we want it to be at $20. So I hope that helps to explain the logic behind how we're deciding which keyword should be increased or decreased. So let's jump back into the strategy. Okay, so the first step here is then going to say, all right, we've had clicks yesterday, everything else lines up, so let's assess the keyword to see where it needs to go in terms of bids. So the first thing it's going to do is look at the last 30 days at the keyword level and say, have you had 2 or more conversions in the last 30 days? If you have, then it passes down here and starts bidding according to these rules. And we'll talk about these rules in a second. If, however, the keyword hasn't had 2 conversions in the last 30 days, it then moves on over here and it says, have you had 3 or more conversions in the last 60 days? If you haven't, let's expand the time period out a little bit. We'll keep following our line here. We assess to say, all right, well, you haven't had 3 in the last 60 days. Have you had 3 in the last 90? And I've just increased it from 2 to 3 to try and get a little bit more accuracy around the cost per conversion that we're working out. So let's assume it still hasn't had 3 conversions in 90 days. Let's continue on and see what happens. Okay, we're going to check and see whether the keyword has had any conversions at any point in its lifetime. So let's say it hasn't. Maybe it's a new keyword, or it's a keyword that's actually quite a bad one and it's never really performed very well. So what happens in that scenario? Alright, so our keywords gets assessed here first of all to see whether or not the cost of the keyword, so the amount spent on the keyword, has that exceeded the campaign average CPA times 3. So if our average campaign CPA was maybe $30 in that last example because it was a bit high and we were trying to bring it down. So let's say it was $30 on average. This step would look at the average CPA and say, well, 3 times 30 is 90. Have we spent more than $90 on this keyword and not converted? If that's the case, then it's going to pause the keyword and stick a label on that so that it's easily identified as to why the keyword was paused. Presuming, however, that we haven't spent that amount of money, then we're going to come across here and we're going to say, was our average position better than 0? As in, did we actually have a recorded ad position in AdWords? Presuming that we do, well, I guess if it doesn't, then it's going to do nothing. It's just going to label the keyword and say, this keyword didn't have a position yesterday, so therefore I'm not going to make any big changes. But presuming that we did have some sort of ad position yesterday, then the system is going to say, in this case, I've set like a safety zone in here between position 2.8 and 2.6. So if the keyword is somewhere in between that, then it's going to ignore it and not make any bids. If, however, the average position is greater than 2.8, so that means if the average position is something like 5 or 6, then it's going to pass down through here and do some sort of a bid increase. And similarly here, if the average position is too far up the page, so if it's at, say, position 2 or 1, then we're going to be decreasing the bids to try and push the position down. So you'll notice here that this is essentially an ad position strategy, which is, I've found, a pretty good place to be for keywords that actually haven't converted yet. So there'd be some additional things in here that you might want to add in, maybe some things like impression shares and stuff like that, but just to keep a simple ad position strategy running on those keywords that haven't converted yet, I find that this 90% of the time this does a pretty good job without getting too complex. So let's go back to the beginning of our strategy so that we can explore what happens when a keyword actually has some conversion data that we can use to work out where our bids need to be. So let's look at a keyword that has had 2 or more conversions in the last 30 days. And we can even, we'll go back to 30 days here, and we'll use this one here as our example because it had 11 conversions. So we know that that one was pretty good. So let's have a look here. The first thing it does is it checks to see whether the CPC is greater than the target times 2. So what that means is it's going to say, on that calculation we did just before where we worked out that our bids, not our bids, our CPC needs to be at $1.52. This is going to assess the keyword to see whether or not the current CPC from yesterday is greater than $3.04. So it's essentially looking for something that's really high, like way above where it should be. And what it's going to do, if that happens, it's going to decrease the bids by a reasonably large amount. And this is where our custom variables start to come into play. So we can say here we want the decreased bid decrease amount. So in this case, I'll just check and see what we've got. I think we've got 5 cents or something as the bid decrease amount. All right, so we're using 5% and 5 cents as our variables here. So if we jump back into that process, Okay, so knowing that we're going to be decreasing by either 5 cents or 5%, we've got this question that helps us to determine whether we should be decreasing by an amount or by a percentage. And essentially this question is asking, is the current maximum CPC below $1? If the CPC is below $1, and you try to do a 1% change, for example, then your bids won't actually change because they're less. The change that you're trying to do is less than 1 cent. So that's why we've got this split here. So it allows for you to have anything as low as a 1% or a 1 cent change in your decreases, so that Adwords will actually accept those changes. So in this case, we're looking for a 5 cent or a 5% change. Our current CPC yesterday, let's go and have a look and see what that was. Here we go, so $1.78. So we're going to be doing a 5% decrease on this max CPC here. So we'll go back to our process and say, okay, well, what if we're not ridiculously high over our target? In fact, this one wouldn't have changed that keyword because it wasn't 2 times our ideal CPC. It wasn't over $3.04. So in fact, this one wouldn't have changed under this logic. So then it would have passed through here and said, okay, well, it's not crazily expensive. Is the CPC super low? So is it below 50% of our target? So are we looking at around 75, 76 cents? So is it less than that in terms of the actual CPC yesterday? Was it less than 75, 76 cents? So if it was, it will come down here and it will do an increase by 5% or 5 cents. So in our case, for this particular keyword, the answer to that is also no, because it wasn't below 76 cents. So we'll move to the next question and say, all right, was our CPC above target? Now, the answer to that one is actually yes, because our CPC target was $1.52. This is $1.78. So this one would fire, it would come down through here, come down here, and fire here, and then pass down and actually have a decrease half the amount that we'd set in the variables. And the reason I've set this to half is that I wanted the variables to reflect the maximum changes that I wanted to make on any one bid. So that would be applied generally where you've either got really, really high CPCs that need to come down quickly, or you've got super low CPCs that have room to move up quite quickly. So these two here are operating on the full increases and decreases. The next two steps are operating on half that amount. So in this case, it would be 2 cents or 2.5%. So our keyword now would pass through here and it would say, all right, our bid, is it less than $1? No. So it will come here and decrease the bids by 2.5%. So it's decreasing the bids by the custom variable that we have set divided by 2. Now, assuming that if the keyword was passed through here as a no and went to this next step, all that means is that it's somewhere between here and here. So it means that it's not expensive, it's not super cheap, it's not a little bit over target, so therefore it's a little bit under target. So we're going to do a little bid to increase. So that logic is exactly the same if we move across to the next time period, which was 60 days. The logic is exactly the same, it's just got 60-day periods instead. And same for 90-day periods and for all time. So there's our 90 days, and it's exactly the same logic, doing either full increases and decreases or partial increases and decreases, depending on how close we are to target. So you'll notice also in here that we've got labels coming in at each point during the process. And so what these labels are designed to do, if I just open this one up, we'll have a little look. This is what you would see in your Adwords account, and I'll show you that live in a second. The label is essentially designed to make it really easy for you to see which keywords are landing at which points in your bid process, so you can then assess within the Adwords account, you can look and see if a particular keyword looks odd. For example, if you're bidding really high on it and the conversion numbers are really low or something like that, because you've got a label on it, you know exactly where that keyword has landed in the bid process, And you should be able to then track that back through the bid process and look for any logic errors in your process. Or it could be that you've got some unique circumstances with your client that might need an additional couple of steps put into your process. So an example of that might be where you've got clients that always search for a particular search term, and they're always on you about visibility on that particular term. So you could do something like add a label to that term and call it a high priority keyword or something. And then within your bid process, you could actually single those out and treat them totally differently, and maybe have an ad position strategy with some impression share stuff overlaid. So that would be an example of identifying a keyword that may not be reacting to the bid strategy quite the way you wanted it to. So you can identify where it's coming through and change it if you need to. And how we do that is essentially you'll go into the AdWords account, into the Dimensions tab, and we look at, let's say, well, I normally start at yesterday as the filter, because the bid strategies, they're all based on what was the CPC yesterday. And so what I'm looking for is things like, here we go, what am I going to do for this cohort of keywords that are in this particular label? So this label is step 16. It's saying that I'm reducing my bids because my conversions are greater than 0 all time. So if I come back to here, I'm actually at this level here. So I'm at this step here. So it's coming through, that bunch of keywords has come through here. It's had some conversions all time, but it hasn't had enough to trigger the previous steps. So it's coming in here and it's landed here to say my CPC is a little bit over target for what it should be based on the all-time conversions for this keyword. And so it's come through and it's doing it. Oh, there we go. I've actually just found some changes in my logic here. This shouldn't be increased, that should actually be decreased. So let's have a look. Yep, okay, so I'll have to fix that. I'm so glad I found that. So what it should be doing is doing a slight decrease. But it looks like I might have just mislabeled that, but I'll fix that before I send it live for everybody. So that's how you'd find where a particular keyword landed in a process. And so I've set up the labels to try and make it nice and easy so you can quickly assess what these things are looking like. So I can say here that my CPCs yesterday were a bit high, and so that's why I'm reducing my bids. So I should be able to look here and say, well, I've actually had, if I look all time, for example, on step 16, so I've got step 16 all time. I've only ever had one conversion. It's cost me $44. We know that our target conversion should be around $20. So yeah, this one should definitely be decreasing. So then I'd be looking at, say, the next one and say, well, this one's actually a 30-day time period. So I'd go and have a look at 30 days and say, all right, my conversions are greater than or equal to 2 on the last 30 days, which they are. I've had 17 in this cohort of keywords, and my average cost per conversion's been $24. So yes, that makes sense. That bunch of keywords should be reducing to try and find our. Actually, I'll look at yesterday to find our average CPC. So we know that $1.52 was ideal. This is actually at $1.67. So yeah, it's still a little bit high yesterday. So that bunch of keywords definitely should be getting pushed down. So if you're looking in here, for example, last 30 days, and you see something that looks really odd, like you've spent a whole bunch of money and you've had no conversions, or conversion costs are ridiculously high, then it gives you an idea that maybe you can go back and have a look at, first of all, the bid strategy to try and work out whether that logic is good for this client. And then you can also look at the keywords, because on the keywords, you'll notice here, if you enable your labels column, you'll see here that you can just hover over each one of these and say, all right, what step is this particular keyword up to? So I can just hover down here and say, no, that one was ignored. This one was reduced because the conversions are greater than 0 all time, and the CPC is still a bit high. So if that keyword was something that I knew was something the client really wanted to look for, then maybe I could change my bid logic to incorporate that. But on the whole, as a starting point, I found that this strategy is one of the best CPA strategies that I've come across. So happy to field any questions that you might have. Please post any comments down below on the Facebook group, and yeah, enjoy it.